Good evening, welcome. This is To The Point. I am Ankit Tyagi. As always, let's first start with the big picture as far as the coronavirus is concerned across the country. Let's very quickly take a look at the big numbers. 49,391 cases have been reported in India, just shy of 50,000 mark. 1,694 deaths have also been reported from the country. Maharashtra remains the worst hit state with 15,525 cases and 617 deaths. Gujarat now at number 2 with 6,245 cases and 368 deaths. Meanwhile, Delhi has reported 5,004 cases. 64 deaths have been reported from the national capital. Before, in fact, we move on, I just very quickly want to bring your attention to this, in fact, data which has come, on the right now, which has been spoken about right now. And I would just ask our team to, in fact, focus on this, come closer to this data. On 23rd of April, Niti Aayog had projected that new COVID cases could get closer to zero by mid-May. But what this data seems to be suggesting is absolutely opposite. So this is what the Niti Aayog's trajectory for the COVID-19 progression in India was. And it said that after the lockdown gets over, somewhere around 16th May, the numbers could start coming down. And that gave people a lot of hope. That's when they started talking about extension of the lockdown only till 16th, and then of course life returning to some sort of normalcy. But at least if you see this graphic at this point of time, this is the trajectory, the red dot of the Niti Aayog, what it was projecting. But look at the cases. I mean, if you look at somewhere around 4th May, the cases should have come under 1,000, around 500 to 700 mark. But at this point of time, and then of course could have followed this trajectory all the way to zero. But at this point of time, the cases in India, as we know, in the daily number of cases are only on the rise, with maximum cases being reported just yesterday. So this is, in fact, very closely being watched, and this possibly is going to decide what is the future in the war as far as coronavirus is concerned. Now, I want to shift focus to the other big story that we are tracking right now. A lot of talk around whether schools would reopen, when would they reopen, what would be the shape of the new education system. Countries across the world are ready to open up their schools, but concerns remain as far as the children are concerned. Now, global studies have warned that children can lead to continuation of the transmission chain. And another study also indicates that children can carry high level of viral load in their bodies as adults. These are the factors that are possibly going to decide, the answers to these are possibly going to decide how and when can our children go back to schools.
The world seems to be in a rush to reopen schools. From Asia to the Middle East to Europe. Masks, staggered classes, distancing, sanitization. That's how classrooms reopened at Wuhan, the initial epicenter of the outbreak. But with coronavirus still an issue elsewhere, bringing kids back to school isn't an easy road. Parents in France are worried after President Emmanuel Macron rolled out plans to restart schools gradually.
I think putting the kids back in school is a good idea, but the question is when. Isn't it a little too early? This must happen in good sanitary conditions.
Fewer children compared to adults have fallen ill from coronavirus. But now researchers in China and Germany warn youngsters can continue the transmission chain. A team of international researchers in China found children under the age of 14 had triple the number of contacts as adults. A threefold increase in opportunity to come into contact with an infected person and spread the virus. An online pre-peer review study by German and British scientists found children can carry as high levels of coronavirus in their bodies as adults without showing symptoms.
qui nous semble très compliqué.
And so we made sure that the children are spaced apart with 1.5 meters of distance between them, that they stay at their desks by themselves to respect social distancing before two of them would share the desk.
À la rentrée prochaine.
Countries like France and South Korea are readying their schools for reopening. Israel has opened some of its already, and fears are mounting that schools might turn into nurseries of new infections. Bureau Report, India Today.
I'm now being joined by Marco Ajelli, mathematical epidemiologist, at the T. Bruno Kessler Foundation, who is part of this study, who has very closely studied these global trends. Marco, I just want to, first of all, welcome and thank you for speaking to us here on India Today. I want to understand from you, children usually during this entire coronavirus pandemic have been seen as people, those who have largely not been infected much. What does this study show? Are they as bigger carriers of the viral load as adults are? Has there been any comparison in the study that you have done?
First of all, you have to consider that during the outbreak, most of the schools were already closed. So substantially, what we observe is that children have much more contact than adults, but when schools are open. During a lockdown, children have substantially the same amount of contacts as adults. So it means that it is possible that we are not observing so many cases in children also because of this reason, also because they are not having their usual pattern of contacts in schools, which is one important point. The other important point that we found in our work is that actually we measure that children are about 3 times less susceptible to infection than adults. So it means that they have 3 times less probability of getting the infection if they contact a person carrying the virus. The point, however, is this one, is that these are just 2 pieces of the story. If you want to understand what happens when you reopen the schools, you need also to understand how much of the transmission is related to children. So not just how much they get infected, but how much they spread the infection. And this is something which is still unknown. So this is the core part. There is this big unknown because we know 2 factors, but we don't know the third one. And we would need all these 3 factors to make a very informed decision based on evidence about whether it is time to open the schools or not.
You know, the study also has very closely looked at what happened in Wuhan, the epicenter of the epidemic. This is where it all started. Now, schools have opened in Wuhan. We saw those visuals coming out of children, you know, just in the classrooms where they are sitting at a substantial distance apart from each other. What have you found as far as this entire study on Wuhan is concerned? Are they now, what sort of patterns are they showing as far as the transmission of the virus is concerned?
Well, at the moment, the situation in Wuhan is that probably there is a very, very few local transmission, if any. So this is a different situation than the one currently faced in a lot of other countries like India, which there is ongoing transmission. So this is a completely different perspective looking at the situation in Wuhan at the moment or in India now, because it is not comparable the number of cases that you have at the moment. So we cannot, let's say, look at what happened now in Wuhan to take decision for other countries where there is ongoing transmission.
You know, you're talking about India, because there are parents who are worried that their children are losing a substantial amount of their academic session being in the lockdown. People are also talking about a new curriculum, possibly a new session that is going to begin from somewhere around July or August. And do you think it will be too early right now? Because there are too many unanswered questions, as you said, in this entire study about the chain of transmission. Can children give the virus to adults, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, exactly. So at the moment, it's very difficult for decision makers to take a decision because, unfortunately, we cannot give them all the information that they need. So this is the most important point. So I cannot give this answer, but nobody in the world can give you the answer of what will happen if you reopen the school. We can make some reasonable assumption, like you mentioned before, the German study that found the same viral load by children and adults, which is an information that can be used. It is not a definitive proof, but it is an information that can be used. And for instance, if we use this information and we assume that does children have the same transmission probability than adults, substantially what we get is that the reproduction number would increase to about 0.3, so 0.5. The reproduction number is substantially the number of infected individuals that are generated by one primary infector.
In the end, I also want to understand from you, because your study also suggested that children also have a bigger contact ratio in comparison to adults. When these children go to the schools, they intermingle with each other. The possibility of them getting in contact with more people, more children, is higher than that of adults. Is that going to be the most crucial factor before we decide whether children should go back to schools like the before coronavirus normal world?
Yeah, exactly. The number of contacts in school is one of the three main factors that we need to take into account when we have to decide whether to reopen or not the schools. Because on average, we see that in China, there are about 3 times more contacts that children make if they go to school instead of the adults. So it means that they have a much larger pool of people that they can contact, so people that can give them the infection or people that they can spread the infection to. So this is a very important talking point. Also, you have to consider that during a lockdown, you substantially have the same contacts repeated over and over again. So what we find in our studies, like 95% or 97% of your contacts are with your household members.
Yes.
And they are always the same. So you cannot infect, let's say, outside the household. As soon as you start to bring children at school, they start to meet other families. So you're substantially connecting different families so the infection can spread.
The chain of transmission could be much, much bigger. The pool could be much bigger. And that is something that possibly will be the most important factor before the governments decide whether they want to reopen or not. And depending on the kind of viral load or the cases that there is in any other country. Thank you so much, Marco. It's fascinating to, in fact, read your study. Of course, in the days to come, you would be substantiatingly adding more data to this that possibly is going to help all the authorities to take a decision on whether and how soon can the schools be reopened. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you.
I now want to shift focus to the story that we have been following here on To The Point. The boys' locker room scandal is getting bigger with each passing day. While massive outrage on social media continues after a group's obscene chats and screenshots were leaked, Delhi police has now fastened the probe. The admin of the group has been arrested and several other members of the group have been identified, are now being questioned.
A close social media group conversation has turned into one of the biggest scandals in the country in recent times. Cross conversations, sexist slurs, and gang rape threats. This is what the boys' locker room, an Instagram group of young boys, was all about. The conversation within the group is too crude to be reproduced, and India Today has censored it. The admin of the social media group, a class 12 student but an adult, has been arrested. 27 members of the group have been identified and 15 have been questioned so far. Cops have also identified other members of the group who shared obscene messages and morphed pictures of minor girls on social media. Responding to India Today, social media giant Facebook that owns Instagram clarified that it does not allow any behavior that promotes sexual violence or exploit anyone, especially women. India Today spoke to the whistleblower who exposed what the boys' locker room was up to.
मैंने सबसे पहले तो उन सारी लड़कियों को जिन जिन की आईडीज़ उस पे गिवन थी, उस पे स्क्रीनशॉट्स में थी, तो मैंने उससे उनको ट्रैक डाउन किया। जिनको जिनको मैं कर पाया उनका मैंने ग्रुप बनाया, उनको इन्फॉर्म किया इस सब के बारे में। लड़कियों में मोस्टली लड़कियां माइनर्स थी, और जब उनको इस सब के बारे में पता लगा तो वो काफ़ी ज़्यादा डरी हुई थी।
The boys' locker room scandal surfaced last weekend. Many social media users and teenage girls started posting screenshots of the frightful conversations on Instagram and Twitter. A girl posted screenshots sent to her by one of the members. Women of different age groups are now coming out to reveal how similar groups have existed in colleges, offices, and other places. The boys' locker room scandal has clearly opened up a can of worms. Bureau Report, India Today.
Joining me now, a young man who showed the courage to expose this disgusting, disturbing chat group. Remember, many of the boys who were chatting in this group and many of the girls who were being targeted in this group are personally known to him. So this wouldn't have been, quite an easy task for him. He's a minor. I will refrain from taking his name. You heard what he said about how the girls were very, very scared when, in fact, he went ahead, made this separate chat group and started exposing the other boys. Welcome to The Point. I just want to start with you because we've been reading a lot of reports about a lot of girls who were being spoken about in this chat group, who in fact dared to complain, are now saying that they are being threatened. Are you also experiencing any sort of stress in that regard?
I haven't received any threats as of yet, but the girls who stood up against those boys have been getting a lot of threats, threats like rape threats, death threats, and also they were accused of uh, of this uh, of this fact that these girls did all these things just for their personal gain and just to gain fame.
It's disturbing that even right now, these kind of threats are going on, even despite the investigation starting on this. But, a lot of people have been saying that, this is the usual behavior of young adolescents. Is this kind of a group, a lot of people are interested in knowing, is this kind of a group, an anomaly, or there are many other chat groups common among your friends who are as crude or possibly use a similar kind of language for each other?
So this is very common. This is very common. Even at some point, even I have been a part of groups like these. I was added to groups like these randomly. And when if we talk about this locker room boys group, these boys used to add random people just to get more and more content for their group. And also, as you told everyone, and everyone knows about the fact that they used to take screenshots from girls' profiles, and they used to upload them on the group, and they used to pass cheap comments on those pictures, and also body shaming was there and all that.
Before I let you go, there is now a trend going on about girls' locker room where the projection is that the girls are also talking in a very obscene way about boys. They are trying to make an equivalence as far as boys and girls are concerned. Are your friends, those who are right now, those who have been targeted in the boys' locker room, what is your view as far as this girls' locker room is concerned? Are they same? What do you have to say about that?
I don't have much to comment on this because I really don't know about the girls' locker room. But what I know is that in girls' locker room, the two girls were talking about one girl, and the language they both used were not right. but it cannot be compared. This girls' locker room cannot be compared to the boys' locker room, because in the boys' locker room, the pictures of all the girls, like the girls whose pictures were there in that group, they didn't know about anything. What was they didn't know anything about a group called the boys locker room. They didn't know their pictures were there in that group. But when it comes to the girls locker room, those two girls are talking about this girl, and the girl they both are talking about was added in the group. It was like a fun talk. Not, I'm not saying that it is that it was anyway right, because the language they used wasn't right, but the girl was added in that group and she knew that those girls were talking about her.
Thank you for joining us on the broadcast. As the whistleblower was also saying, there is no equivalence. You can't justify saying that, because the boys were doing it, the girls are doing it, so it's all okay. Two wrongs don't make right. If the girls were, in fact, making some indecent comments, the kind that we have seen, it's equally condemnable. Action should be taken, but the fact is that can't be used, this kind of whataboutery can't be used to justify what this boys' locker room has exposed. I also now very quickly want to go across to Priya Malik, actor, activist. She has been talking a lot about not only this incident, but about gender justice as well. Priya, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here on India Today. I want to understand from you, when you talk about this story, and when I was in fact discussing this in the newsroom, and especially my women colleagues, they were shocked, they were disgusted, but they were not surprised. Isn't it disturbing that this has in some way or the other become normal? It's like it is expected that boys, men are going to behave this way.
Ankit, I'll give you an example to elucidate. The fact that I no longer wake up and check the number of COVID cases in India, which I was doing up until like a week ago, means that it's become the new normal for me, which means I know that the numbers would have risen. I normally now wear a mask, I normally now wear a glove, and I go about my usual life. Now, it hurts for me to give this example because this is exactly how we women have accustomed ourselves to the idea of objectification. Even when I read those chats, I must say that I did not sleep all night. But yes, was I shocked? Was I surprised? Unfortunately, no. And I wish we hadn't normalized it. I wish we were still living in times where this enraged the hell out of us. But the fact that it doesn't, the fact that this has become a part and parcel of our everyday lives, that really hurts.
A lot of people seems to be suggesting, Priya, and you must also been hearing about it, that it's just a case of bad parenting. Is it as simplistic a view that it can be? Are we just trying to close our eyes as a society by just pointing out finger in one direction?
That somewhere we are all responsible for how these children have turned out. I think if at any point in time in life, if you have laughed at a sexist joke, you are a part of the problem. I think anywhere at any point in life, if you have enjoyed a movie scene where a woman is being harassed, stalked, you are a part of the problem. I think if you haven't stopped your dad from making fun of your mom because of her gender, you are a part of the problem. And if you haven't stood up for this at any point in life, whether it was a WhatsApp chat or a real life conversation because you thought, oh my God, what are my friends going to think? Then you are a part of the problem. So the fact of the matter is that we cannot shake ourselves off of this responsibility and think, this is not my problem. This is our problem. And we need to talk about it. And the fact that there needs to be sex education in our schools, not just the biology of sex, but the psychology of sex. We need to start talking about these things with our children.
I just have two quick questions because you've been very vocal about this. Many are suggesting, and this is something that is going on not only on social media, but if you read a lot of posts on other platforms as well, that this was just a harmless chat. It was just boys talking, two boys. It was not public. It was not, in fact, they were just talking about certain things. It's not that they were going to act upon it. I mean, it's surprising that people are trying to justify it, that even if people are talking, some young boys are talking about gang rape and other things, that is being justified by saying, you know what, it was just harmless boys' talk. Nobody was going to act on it.
The fact that we take it so casually is wrong. The fact those conversations were so casual in nature, that means that it has seeped so hard in our society that we can talk so frankly and casually about, oh, let's rape her, or rape to nahi kiya na. The fact that we wait for the action to happen. Words do translate into actions. Thoughts do translate into actions. That's what leads to actions. So obviously our patriarchal society is to be blamed, not just in our country, I think all over the world. If you look at the statistics of rape, recently I realized that there are 106 rapes a day in our country, which means that by the time I finish speaking to you today, in normal circumstances, in non-COVID circumstances, a woman would be getting raped somewhere.
Priya, you know, you were very vocal about the aftermath of Nirbhaya. We've just very recently seen that the people, those who perpetrated the crime on Nirbhaya, December 16, 2012, were very recently hung. Does it give you a feeling that from there, the outrage, the way we were speaking about it, the change in the law, we have still not come very far? I mean, at that point of time, the argument was possibly that these are people, those who are uneducated from the lower strata of the society. How does boys from the best of the schools in the most privileged position talking about this, how does it in fact translate as far as you are concerned? How do you make sense of that?
What a great question, Ankit, because often when I publish a poem which is talking about the rape culture and toxic masculinity, like when the Hardik Pandya case happened and I had published a piece about it, a lot of people comment on it saying, oh, but why are you talking in English? The real people who need to understand it are the ones who don't understand English. Oh, you should go and talk to the villagers about it. And this is a classic example of why everybody, regardless of their social status and where they sit in the society, is a part of this toxic masculine culture. The fact that your class, race, gender, none of that matters. If you are doing this, you are wrong. It doesn't have to be. And you know, we need to understand that there's a difference between literacy and education as well. You might be getting literate in the best schools and the best colleges of the world, but if you're not educated, if you don't talk like an educated individual who should understand concepts such as consent and objectification, toxic masculinity, then you're not really educated. Then where do the riches come if they do not come from the riches of your personality, your ideals, and your mind? I think, and I have been a school teacher, so I have seen what perpetrates in high schools, regardless of what kind of high schools we talk about.
We'll leave it there, Priya. Thank you for being as candid as you always are. And of course, a lot of talking points there. Important thing is to keep discussing this, make this discussion so public that it goes into every drawing room so that we don't see a repeat of such activities and then, you know, a momentary shock and awe and outrage and then everything dies. It has to become the part of the way we think as a society. Thank you so much, Priya Malik, for joining me. That's all the time that I have on this edition of To The Point. But I leave you with these visuals. Visuals of a family of doctors. All of them, in fact, 3 of them are doctors who received a very warm welcome from their neighbors in Hyderabad when they returned home after 2 weeks of COVID-19 duty. They were showered with petals, cheered as they walked to their residence. Quite a nice, happy feeling to end the day with.